In this last video on decimals involving decimals in the thousandths place, we're going to learn about comparing and ordering decimals. So, in the first question here, I have 4 different decimals: 2.193, 1.981, 3.101, and 0.999. So I have 4 different decimals here. And the question is asking me to order it. So we're going to order it from the smallest decimal to the biggest decimal. As you've seen in the previous video on ordering, you always start with the number in the largest place value. So in these examples, we are going to start with the number in the ones column in each of them, because the ones column is the biggest one. Tenths is smaller, hundredths is even smaller, and thousandths is the smallest. So we're going to look at the numbers that are in the ones place and look for the smallest one first. So I have 0, 1, 2, and 3. 0 I can see is the smallest, so that means that this decimal is the smallest decimal, 0.999. Right, so I've used this decimal. Then I have 1, 3, and 2. 1 is the next biggest, so I'm going to say 1.981 next. Then I'm going to move on to number 2, because 2 is smaller than 3. So I'm going to say 2.193, and that means the last one is 3.101. And that is how I'm going to order my decimals from smallest to biggest using the ones column first. Now this was a very easy example because all the numbers were already in decimals. However, in example number 2, you can see that I have a combination of decimals and fractions in this question, and I need to order them from smallest to biggest. You cannot order decimals and fractions when there's a combination of both decimals and fractions. You first need to change all of them to be decimals so that they are all the same. So 7.231 is already a decimal, so I'm going to leave it just like that. 0.35 is also already a decimal, so I'm going to leave it just like that. I'm going to change these 2 fractions so that they are decimals, and then it will be easy for me to see which one is bigger and which one is smaller. 7/25. Now, we cannot change this to a decimal because the denominator is not 10, 100, or thousands for the tenths, hundreds, and thousandths column. So, before I can change it to a decimal, I first have to change the whole fraction so that the denominator is 100. I know to get 25 to 100, I multiply by 4. So 25 times 4 is 100. What you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So I'm going to say 7 also times 4, which gives me 28. Now I have 28 over 100, and it's easy to change this fraction to a decimal. Because I look at my denominator and I have 100, I know that I'm going to have numbers up until the hundredths place. Put my 8, put my 2, and I put the 0 in the ones place. 0.28 is that decimal there. 7/25 is the same as 0.28. So I've completed this one. Now I'm going to look at the last one. I have 10 in my denominator, so I know that I'm going to have numbers up until the tenths column. 3 is my numerator, it becomes my tenth. And then in my ones place, I have 1 whole, so I'm going to put my 1 whole down. 1 and 3/10 is the same as 1.3. Now, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 decimals, and it's easy for me to figure out which is the smallest and which is the biggest. I look first at all the ones columns. 1, 1, 1, and 1. Okay, here I have 0 and here I have 0. So these 2 are the smallest. To find out which is the smallest of the 2, I move on to the tenths column. Here I have a 2 and here I have a 3. 2 is smaller than 3, which means that this one is the smallest, and that means that 7/25 is the smallest. Remember, you always have to answer the question using the numbers that they gave you. I'm not going to write 0.28. I'm going to write 7/25 because that is the answer or the question or the number that the question gave me. So I've used this one. I know that one's the smallest, and that means that this one is the second smallest, 0.35. Right, so I've used that one and I've used this one. So I have these two left. 1.3 and 7. So I'm looking at my ones place. 1 and 7. 1 is way smaller than 7. So I'm going to put 1 and 3/10 next. 1 and 3/10 is next. So I've used that one. And last off, I have 7.231, which is the biggest decimal. So sometimes we are given decimals and fractions and we need to change them all to decimals first before we can determine which is the smallest and which is the biggest. If you understand this clearly, then please do this example on your whiteboard now.